Hey, Pam, do you ever wonder what ordinary people can do about the problem of targeted violence and extremism?
I sure do. And that's why we welcome you to this courageous conversation. Our session topic today is preventing violent extremism. I'm Pam Steger, Director of Public Engagement for Courageous RI, a Department of Homeland Security funded initiative to address the divisions that can lead some people to extremist views and actions. We're doing that by using media literacy, civil conversation, and civic engagement to turn down the heat that can lead to hate.
I'm Renee Hobbs, founding director of the Media Education Lab in Rhode Island. At the Media Education Lab, we define media literacy as asking critical questions about what you read, watch, see, hear, play, and use. We use media literacy questions to promote dialogue and discussion. Today, you're going to get a chance to apply the critical questions of media literacy after learning more about violent extremism and considering the way different types of media represent tragic events resulting from targeted violence and terrorism. Now, here's the 5 critical questions that we use to analyze any media message. Ooh, right there. Who is the author and what is the purpose of this message? What techniques are used to attract and hold your attention? What lifestyles, values, and points of view are represented? How might different people interpret this message differently? And what is omitted? Let's take a look at an example of some social media we recently saw on Instagram. Before we get into the questions, though, Pam, can you provide one word about how this post makes you feel?
I guess frustrated is the one that pops up first for me. Frustration at the vicious cycle it looks like someone is depicting. I can relate to that. How does it make you feel?
This post makes me feel hopeless. It's a never-ending cycle, right? Starting with the mass shooting and then the media extravaganza and the thoughts and prayers and then the debates. And the one that just kills me, the one that makes me feel hopeless, is no one actually does anything and back to quote, unquote, normal. Media messages, they bring up a lot of different emotions, and it takes time to recognize them and to notice the differences in our interpretations. Strong emotions like fear and anger are used by media makers to arouse emotions for pleasure or power or profit. So we really want people to pause when they feel a strong emotional reaction. And the critical questions of media literacy really help with that. So let's share some reflections on those critical questions. That first question, Pam, which one, what is that?
Who is the author? And I find that hard to say with this. I mean, it could be the person who created it in the first place or the one who posted it to social media. Because of the ease of sharing and the lack of citation, social media is a form of media that sometimes makes it difficult to know who created the original message.
True.
What techniques are used to attract and hold your attention, Renee?
Question 2. Of course, I noticed the format. It's a cocktail napkin.
Yeah.
And there's something very charming and informal about that. It makes it seem like there must have been a conversation and somebody sketched this out in the conversation. And I do think the language is very powerful, like that phrase, media extravaganza. That seems to offer kind of a commentary on how terrorist attacks are profitable for news organizations, because those kind of events increase viewership and readership for days. But the never-ending cycle, the arrows are a feature of the media message that makes me feel hopeless.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing someone would draw when out with friends at a restaurant or a bar, right?
Exactly.
Which leads right into what lifestyles, values, and point of view is represented. Our third question. This little message seems to me to communicate a person's dissatisfaction with the status quo approach to dealing with extremist violence. And it's probably done by an adult with strong feelings about the subject. And maybe, as you said, with a group of people having a conversation about it. And someone maybe who values progress and government action. Although I guess I could also imagine one of the youth activist survivors from the Parkland, Florida high school shooting creating it as well. I've heard them voice this same frustration at their March for Lives rallies. What about you?
Yeah, what lifestyles, values, and points of view are represented? Somebody might see this napkin and say, hey, this is actually motivating somebody to be inspired to break this cycle of violence. And so then that brings us to the next question. How might different people interpret this message differently? I think if it was somebody who is trying to get gun laws passed, or if it was an activist working on gun regulation, they might make this might make them feel angry, especially that phrase, no one actually does anything.
Hmm.
So if you were a gun rights activist, that would hurt, but then if you were fighting against gun regulation, then you might interpret that nobody actually does anything is something like, oh, thank goodness, right? That's a good thing. But if I was a member of a targeted group, if I was a member of a targeted group because of my religion or my ethnicity or my race, this thing might make me feel anxious. And so, because even though we might all see the same media message, we don't all interpret it the same way. Meaning is in people. And that's why we think it's important to exchange our different interpretations with people. It helps us move beyond stereotypes, and it helps us move beyond polarization.
So true. And we always want to ask what is omitted. That last question is an important one because we know that every media message has been created with a point of view and has to take form and space into consideration. So a lot is always left out of any media message. The first thing that comes to mind for me in this one are grief and trauma. There's nothing in this message about what the friends and families of the victims go through when there's an incident of targeted violence. What about people who identify with the victims, or the first responders, or the morgue or hospital staff where the dead and wounded are taken, or the community at large, or even all of us who read or hear or see these stories in the news? There are so many shockwaves that affect so many of us, don't you think?
Boy, yes, I do. And in fact, it seems like that point of view, that perspective often gets omitted in how people talk about violent extremism. I think the first time I ever even heard that phrase, violent extremism, was after September 11th, 2001. And over the last 20 years, a lot of knowledge has been gained about this important topic, but we want to unpack it a little bit in order to think about the way media messages about extremist violence may impact our beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. Let's talk about the idea of extremism. Political that exist substantially outside more broadly accepted beliefs. Extremists seek radical changes in society stemming from their religious, social, or political belief systems. They seek radical changes in society. And for me, it's really helpful to understand the distinction between extremists and violence. Some extremists believe that success or survival can only be accomplished through hostile actions that are dangerous to human life or destructive of critical infrastructure or key resources. And extremists have been effective in changing the world. That's how the early Protestants did it. They used violence to reduce the power of the Catholic Church, right? And, even during the American Revolution, colonial extremists right here in New England used violence to fight against the control of the British government.
Yeah. And the civil rights movement was known for being a mostly nonviolent social movement, but there were extremists within that movement who believed that racial equality needed to be won by any means necessary. Recently, we've seen anti-government activists who have attacked power plants and environmental extremists who attacked the building of a new police academy in Atlanta.
Yeah, yeah. Extremism, when extremism gets violent, it requires the formation of an in-group and an out-group. And feelings of belonging to an in-group create bonds that lead people to feel protective of their group. And that strengthens their identity and it makes them feel noble and important. And through media and storytelling, an outgroup can also be positioned as a terrible villain that threatens the success or the survival of the in-group. And outgroups can be humiliated, embarrassed, shamed, shunned, verbally abused. And you can use conspiracy theories, propaganda, and disinformation. And those forms of communication can be used to justify violence. Now, check out this image, Pam. This one really startled me. This is a picture of a white man, and the words written on his face suggest somehow that he has all sorts of advantages that he doesn't deserve. Now, this image could create complex feelings in women and in white men. It could make women feel part of an in-group because of their identity, and it could make men feel part of an out-group, and nobody likes feeling part of an out-group, right? So an individual can be radicalized and adopt an extremist ideology without engaging in any kind of violence or terrorism, but radicalization to violent extremism occurs when people adopt a violent extremist or terrorist ideology.
Yeah, that's such an important point. Experts in targeted violence and terrorism prevention tell us that there are signs that can be observed when a person is starting to move towards radicalization and violent extremism. Many people experience uncertainty about the future, a condition which causes extremist movements to thrive. But when you add to this anxiety and depression, being stigmatized, and feeling socially marginalized, it can be volatile. As I always say, hurt people hurt people. Recognizing when people are hurting and their hurt is turning into anger and hatred and radicalization is where prevention comes in. But we also know that there are some pathways to de-radicalization. When people have confidence in the future, they're not likely to become extremists. When they have social contact with people in the out-group, they realize that they're not villains to be feared or blamed. And when people show unexpected kindness or generosity towards them, people's extremist beliefs can be dislodged. Now we'd like you to consider some of these ideas in a small group discussion where we view and discuss a TV news story about violent extremism. Let's watch that video.
All right, we'll watch
clip
it and
now,
then we'll talk about
Renee.
it.
This morning, pain and outrage as America reckons with yet another hate-fueled massacre.
This outsider came with the express purpose to take as many black lives as possible.
The shooter, an apparent white supremacist, driving hundreds of miles to seek out a predominantly black neighborhood in Buffalo. 10 people were killed, including Garnell Whitfield's mother, Ruth.
Our mother, our matriarch, our hero, our angel was taken from us inappropriately.
Whitfield says he's grieving, but also angry, vowing to fight for change.
So what do I do with this anger? How do I use it to affect positive change?
That question on the minds of many as Buffalo joins a growing list of cities terrorized by racially motivated attacks. In 2015, black parishioners were gunned down at a church in Charleston, South Carolina. In 2018, Jewish worshipers were targeted at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Then in 2019, Latino shoppers were killed inside a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. And last year, Asian American women were targeted in spa shootings in Atlanta. According to one global terrorism database, between 2014 and 2019, white supremacist and xenophobic assailants were responsible for more terrorist attacks than any other ideology.
In the FBI's view, the top domestic violent extremist threat we face comes from racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocate for the superiority of the white race.
The gunman in Buffalo etched references to previous shootings on his weapons, and he wrote a 180-page racist rant posted online, repeatedly citing the false, unfounded Great Replacement theory, which suggests Jewish elites are bringing people of color into the U.S. to replace whites. A belief also heard at the far-right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, which ended in one dead. Where did he find this ideology?
Most likely, this person has been radicalized online.
Scott Richmond with the Anti-Defamation League says social media companies have been slow to respond.
People can put whatever they want on there, and it's not controlled.
Senior law enforcement officials say the FBI is seeing a growing number of racially motivated extremism incidents fed by social media and even gaming platforms like Twitch and Discord. We reached out to a number of social media sites. We heard back from just a few. Twitch says that it removed the shooter's live stream as soon as it became aware of it a couple minutes in. Telegram says content that promotes violence is forbidden, and they're removing anything related to the Buffalo shooting, while Discord says hate and violence have no place on their site. They say they are assisting police. But experts say, guys, this is not just on the dark web now. This is on mainstream social media sites. In fact, you can still find video from the helmet cam online right now.
I'm glad you highlighted that part, because there's just no denying the role that social media especially is playing in the self-radicalization of so many people in this country.
And it's said out loud now.
Yeah.
I guess that used to be said in dark corners, but even when you look at that rally, Jews will not replace us. I mean, nothing is like pushed into the background anymore.
Right. And so many people upset. I was just in Buffalo the last 2 days, and people just angry and furious that this wasn't caught sooner.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate.
All the signs appear to have been there, too. Kate, thank you.
Whoa.
Yeah. I hope you were using your 5 questions of media literacy when you were watching that. There certainly should be plenty to discuss and analyze from that 4-minute video. Don't you think, Renee?
Boy, oh boy. Listen here, have a great conversation, right? It's your turn now to keep the courageous conversations going. Thanks for being part of it. Bye now.
Bye.